Hello, and welcome back. My name is Clark, or CP Cunny, and today I'm going to be taking another little departure from my current franchise mode series to talk to you folks about barriers. Now, I'm going to be kind of going through everything that I know about barriers, and hopefully that helps some new players, but hopefully if you've been playing the game for a long time, there's still something here for you to learn. So sit back and enjoy the barrier talk. Per what I've been doing, I've got a little napkin with some notes. I really need a notebook, but I don't have one on hand. But anyway, I've got my notes on a napkin of barriers, and I'm just gonna go ahead and get started here. So where I would like to start is just quite simply the simplest barriers in the game, which is just the in-game barriers. They can be found in this little tab right here. Everything that I'm doing here is on the PC version. It should all translate to the console version. I cannot speak to how easily it translates to the console version because I do not have the console version, but conceptually everything should be on par here. Now, whenever you open the tab, you're going to see all of this stuff right here. But to start, we're just going to look at the barriers. We're gonna come back to the gates in a minute. But you see everything here. These are all just in-game barriers that you can use to contain your animals. Now, every single thing is going to have a little pop-up whenever you hover over it. That's going to have the name of it. It's going to have the resistance grade, dilapidation rate. It's going to have whether or not it's opaque or transparent, climbable or not, and whether or not it is watertight. So the resistance grade is just how strong it is. All of these things can impede animals, just not equally. A hedge is not going to stop an elephant from going anywhere. Just for instance, one being the lowest resistance grade, and I think the highest is 6. Yes, concrete. But then beyond that, we have our dilapidation rate, which is, I'm pretty sure that just refers to how quickly it degrades over time. Whenever you build habitat boundaries out of barriers, then you need to have mechanics come in and regularly check on them. The downfall of my very first zoo was when I started losing money. Eventually, all the mechanics quit, and the barriers just degraded. And next thing you know, there were saltwater crocodiles on the sidewalk. But that's kind of, I guess, something to bear in mind. But ultimately, it was never really a big part of my decision-making process in terms of which barriers I used, opaque or not. Now, you can add windows to a lot of these barriers, not all of them, but you can add windows to a lot of these barriers. So the opaqueness is kind of it's who's to say? It may or may not actually be like tremendously useful. And then also climbable or not. Again, you can also change settings on barriers to make them climb proof if they are not, if they are climbable. At least a lot of them. I don't know. I keep on hovering over the hedge, and I think that the hedge may behave differently than others. But like for example, if you want to use the steel mesh, you can add climb proofing to it to make sure that if you have primates or something that can climb, then they can't just climb out. And then also there's the watertight thing. So the main thing that is going to be watertight, that's actually super relevant that it's watertight, is the glass. So like this guy, and then I'm pretty sure that like the brick might also be. Yeah, brick is, and then the concrete is as well. That just literally just means exactly what it sounds like. If I were to do this, then I could literally just fill it with water. Now that has its uses, but yeah, that has its uses. Not necessarily in the context that I just displayed, although maybe if you get creative. But once we actually place down a barrier, which for the sake of this, I'm just going to use this handy dandy brick barrier. And there's a lot of things that we can do with this barrier. Now, the first thing that we can do is we can make sure that we can do straight or curved selections. If you want to make your barriers kind of flow, have not so much jagged corners, then this is definitely a setting that you want to keep on. Helps you kind of round your edges and stuff, so you don't end up with any weird, super deep and like unwieldy corners that animals can't access. But that being said, though, it's also going to kind of affect the precision of your placement, so it's kind of up to your preference. Next is going to be the height mode here, which the height mode is literally, I guess, just determines how the height of the boundary that you're placing is going to be, like, calculated. So undulating, it literally means it's just, if you think about it's kind of like the difference between, like, radar altitude and sea level altitude, where it's like flat top is just going to be a height from a fixed thing. So like your height from the ground is going to vary as the ground shifts underneath the barrier, whereas undulating, the barrier is going to undulate with the ground. And then flat bottom is I think it behaves very similarly, except it's flat on the bottom and not the top, if that makes sense. I'm not sure. I don't really use these barriers very often, so this is all what I'm remembering. And then angle snap, if angle snap is pretty useful because if you want to go ahead and turn that off. But if you want to actually try to make your things precise geometric shapes, then you can adjust your angle snaps. Like if I wanted to make a square, for instance, then that is a perfect square because the angle snap is on. And then let's see here. I mean, obviously you can adjust the length. So if I wanted to be a little bit more precise with my placements, then I could do something like this. Of course, that kind of slows you down, and you have more of those support posts. Because they're every 2 meters, they're every 10 meters, whatever it was before. Height snap, you can adjust the height like so. Right now it's at 2 meters, but you can make it as high or pretty much as low as you want to. But right now it's snapping every meter. You can adjust it so that it snaps every half meter, every 2 meters, whatever. And then, like I said earlier, you can add windows here. Now this doesn't apply to every single barrier in the game, but it does apply to the brick one here, which is part of the reason why I'm using it as an example. But you can add just a simple glass window, or if you have animals that are particularly shy, you can add one-way glass, which is, These, I don't know, whenever I first started playing this game, then I would just maybe make like a brick barrier, and then where I wanted a viewing gallery, I would swap out the brick for glass, which I have found that using the windows looks much better. There's also height labels that you can turn on or off. You can toggle the different style, but generally speaking, it's something that it's not really essential, I would say. Really, you just want to make sure that your barrier is tall enough, because where you're going to want to start with every habitat is you're just going to want to simply go into the Zoopedia and figure out the needs for the barrier. It's listed right here. Grade 2 is, like I said, the durability, and then how tall it needs to be. Aardvarks are not, they can't jump or climb or anything, so like 1.5 foot tall barrier is perfectly sufficient. But we will switch off of the brick because I did want to show. Oh wait, no, there was one other thing that I wanted to show with the brick barrier. So if we turn off the window now, on the next page here, there's not much on this page, but you can kind of determine whether or not it counts as a habitat perimeter section. I have never found the need to turn that setting off. And then you can make it a curved barrier if you want. Now this might look a little bit odd for the brick barrier, but I could see this being super useful if you were building like a sea lion habitat or some other like semi-aquatic animal, and maybe you wanted to make waves. You can make a wave there, or you can kind of just make it. You can make it bow. You can make it bow down, or if you switch these two, you can make it bow up. You can do whatever. So that's honestly, and that's something that I didn't really use a lot of before. I've been kind of playing around with it in preparation for this video, and I'd recommend that you play around with it too, because it's fun, and there's definitely some creative stuff that you can do with that. But like I said, I did want to display the climb-proof feature. Oh, let me turn that off. Curved barrier top, good. Go ahead and bring that back out to like 10, just so we can see a little bit better. But if we wanted to use this for like a primate enclosure or something that can climb, like maybe like a big cat, then excuse me, You can also come in here, and here is the climb proof setting. Notice it was not on the brick wall. It's not going to be on everything. The brick wall is it's not climbable, so there's not really any need to climb proof that. But generally speaking, most of the things that can be climbed generally have a climb proof setting. And from here, you can literally just select which side you want it to. Oh, wait, sorry. I didn't have it selected. But yeah, so this one means that it can't be climbed from this side. Can't be climbed from this side, or if this happens to be separating two different habitats and you'd want it to be unclimbable from both sides, you can just slap it on both. Now, I think that was... Yeah, now the last thing for these conventional barriers is the glass. Like I mentioned, glass can be used for making like underwater viewing. It's actually essential for underwater viewing, and I'm not gonna just slap something together here hastily. I will reference something. The reason why I did this video in this zoo is so that I can actually use examples of these things actually being employed. But this is an example of what you can do with the watertight feature of the glass. You can kind of just basically, it's as simple as using the terraforming to dig a hole, and then you can kind of run your glass barrier like right through the middle of it. You can put water on one side and a path on the other, so that you can have your guests able to kind of watch the animals as they do their thing underwater. Of course, yeah, I also have the game on paused so I don't get harassed with notifications. A lot of my animals are prone to stress, which, you know, my bad for faulty or maybe overly ambitious habitat design. But, you know, if you wanted to watch a platypus swim underwater, then you can, thanks to the watertight nature of the glass barriers. Now, what's next on my little list? Ah, yes, the gates. So, like I said, the barriers, like it has two tabs. Barriers is what we just looked at. Then we also have gates. I'm going to run through these pretty quickly. So, habitat gates. You need one and only one for every habitat. It can be this one, it can be this one, it can be this one, or either of these two. They all serve the same function. They just look different and behave a little bit differently in the case of these shorter ones. Now, yeah, I mean, in order to define a habitat, like I said, you need a gate. But the habitat also needs to be enclosed by barriers that are shown here on this page. All of these barriers do two things, with the exception of one. This one only does one thing, but they can define a habitat and they can impede the movement of animals. They can act as an actual physical barrier. But the most important thing that they do is define the habitat, because the game doesn't like it when animals are outside of their assigned habitats. Animals can escape, but they're like, you know, they're not supposed to. But like, if you look at this, this has, you can't really see it because a lot of the null barriers are covered up. Let me pick something else. Let me see here. Here we go. So you can kind of see it, like it's hard to see with all the foliage, but like all this null barrier is the defined habitat. I kind of lost my train of thought just now, but every habitat needs to have an enclosed area by barriers and needs to have one and exactly one like staff gate. The staff gate needs to have a path connecting to it from the outside of the habitat. You can run path on the inside. You don't need to. You know, habitats are areas that staff can traverse without using a path. But that's kind of why they have a path kind of automatically connected whenever you place them down. You can place them down individually, or you can just go ahead and place it right on top of a pre-existing barrier. I've found that it is generally easier to do the latter, but you can do either. You can also swap out these paths. So like, it defaults to that staff path, but if I want it to look pretty, I can make it this. Like I said, make it look pretty, and then I pick the most bland path that this game has to offer. But anyway, that's staff gates. You can also select a staff gate. I mean, see, that says incomplete because it's not a full perimeter. But you can select staff gates of a complete habitat to actually like look at the specifics of the habitat. So like here, you know, all this can be accessed just by clicking on the staff gate. which, you know, makes it kind of a pain whenever I go overboard on the staff gates and actually have to go like hunting for them because they're inside buildings and stuff. But anyway, staff gates, yeah, they need to be connected for both, required for a habitat. The guest gates are not required for habitats. As of right now, as of the recording of this video, this is the only one in the game. Although the Barnyard Pack is coming out, I believe, within the next like week or so, and I'm pretty sure it's been confirmed that there's going to be another guest gate. It's going to be like smaller because this one's pretty cumbersome, but same concept as the staff gate. You can just put it in there like so. Again, you can place it before or after you place the barrier. That one's too close to the other barrier, but it needs to be connected by paths on both sides. This allows, obviously, as the name implies, it allows guests to enter the habitat. You're going to want to make sure that it is safe for the animals and the guests to enter the habitat. You can see that on the Zoopedia. So like right here, can guests enter habitat? Yes, they can. Meaning that if I really wanted to make a walkthrough habitat for the aardvark, then I could do that. Now let's see here, where does that leave us? Ah, yes, 2 left. So we have the airlock. Airlock behaves very similarly to a guest path, except it's not guests walking through it, it's vehicles that are probably going to be laden with guests. Now, I probably am going to have a how-to video coming up on how to make like track rides and stuff like that, because that is a whole thing to unpack. But again, it works the same with their placement. You can place it on a pre-existing boundary, or you can place it first and build the boundary around them, and then you basically, whenever you have like the option to lay the track for the ride, you can just connect it on both sides, and then when the ride runs, it'll just open for the Jeep or the train or whatever that's passing through, and it'll pass through. And then lastly, you have the viewing dome entrance. The viewing dome entrance, again, placement is exactly the same. You can place it independently, or you can place it onto a pre-existing boundary. All this stuff's close together, so I can't actually, like, effectively, it's not letting me place. But has a path connected, you need to connect that path. And then once you do that, then you can actually go in and place the viewing domes. The viewing domes are not in the same, they're not in the barriers tab, which, like, it makes sense, but it's also kind of inconvenient. But what that looks like might be like this right here. And then you can literally just find the viewing domes. They are under guest facilities. I don't remember specifically where, but once you place it, then you can literally just select the dome entrance. And what do you know? The dome entrance is right there. And then from there, I don't believe I actually have any guests in here right now, but guests will enter here and they'll pop up down here and enjoy the Tasmanian devil habitat. Now, I believe that's actually it for the barriers tab, with the exception of the null barrier. Now, like I said, the null barrier is... The null barrier is the creative and excessive Planet Zoo player's best friend. Every single habitat in this zoo makes use of null barriers. Now, null barriers, like I said, null barriers are used simply to define habitats. If I make a null barrier square right here, and I add a gate, and I put an animal in here, they'll just walk right out. That should come as no surprise, because if I hit escape, then you'll realize that this barrier is nothing at all. I don't know, the only reason why it shows up when I have the barriers tab open is so that I know that it's there. But aesthetically, there's nothing here. Now, what this allows you to do is it allows you to get creative with how you contain your animals. Now, these barriers look all right. They look okay, you know, but there's not that many of them. There's not that many of them, and if you build a huge zoo like this that has dozens of habitats, it's far from complete, by the way. There's going to be more. Check out the Sanctuary Oslo series while you're here on the channel. Then you'll find out that it's just not enough. So that's where the null barrier comes in. Now, the null barrier allows you to kind of create other means of containing animals. I have some listed here. Let's see here. So once you define the habitat, then you know you can just use whatever to keep them in. You can use whole buildings like this guy right here. This is an entire building that, barring this little viewing gallery, is literally just occupied by the pandas. Like this circle, that is my hard physical barrier. However, if I open the barriers, then, and I zoom in because it might be kind of hard to see. Yeah, it's covered up by the walls, so you can't really see it super well, but there's a barrier running inside that wall. Barrier does not, oh, look at that. I didn't even realize I had a leucistic panda. He's so cute. All right, I'm sorry, I got distracted. But anyway, yeah, you can use whole buildings. Another thing that you can use is custom barriers. You can literally just pick up construction pieces and make barriers yourself. I've made so many different custom barriers. This is the most recent one. I made it yesterday. That video, if you would like to see this habitat being constructed, is on my YouTube. Also, this barrier and several others are on my Steam Workshop. I will include a link to that Steam Workshop down below. So if you would like to look at the barriers that I've used, if you would like to use the barriers that I've used, if you would like to save my barriers and then edit them in some way that makes them your own, and then use those, you are welcome to do any of those things. But that's it for custom barriers. They are way more difficult to work with. Because one, you have to make them. And two, you have to kind of, I don't know, it's a lot easier to just, you know, pull out like this guy and go bam, 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 bam. Whereas this one, you have to like duplicate and move and rotate. And it's a pain. I'm not going to lie to you. If you are starting your custom barriers journey, it's going to take some time, and that's why all of my habitats take as long as they do. I'd say consistently the barriers take half the time that it takes me to make the habitat, and the habitats take me generally 2 hours or more. But that's custom barriers. They are extremely rewarding, I'd say. Once they're finished, like look at this, like I even added a little chain link layer so that nobody loses any fingers by sticking their hands between the planks. Obviously that wouldn't happen in game, but it would happen in my mind. So, you know, I'm prepared. But anyway, moving on from custom barriers. Custom barriers, well, actually, sorry, I say moving on, there's a couple things. They do not dilapidate over time. So while this, heck, there's a mechanic in there right now. While the mechanic will still come to, like, work on the state of things, then I think the only thing that's prone to actually breaking is the gate, because the gate still does have to be there. If you want to connect gates to custom fences, you can do that in a lot of ways. You can use these doorway pieces. You can kind of just manually, I'm going to go back to the Tasmanian devil habitat, you can just manually kind of build around them. Or heck, if you really wanted to, I think that what I did over here was you can actually just include them in a barrier segment and then connect your custom fence to that barrier segment. You know, you can, I mean, honestly, it's the world is your oyster. Do what you want. And I said this on my last little like tutorial tips and tricks type video. Be creative, take chances. Not everything is going to work, but you're going to get some really cool payoffs, and your zoo is going to be yours like very uniquely. But buildings, custom barriers, water. A lot of animals can swim. However, some animals cannot. We as humans are like one of very few primates that are like effective swimmers. Which is why if you go to zoos in real life, then you see like the monkey exhibit. Like monkeys can climb, but a lot of times they have monkeys housed outside on an artificial island surrounded by water. And it's like, well, the monkeys can't swim, so even though the fence might be like 4 feet high and they could climb over it if they could get to it, then they can't get to it. So I just did like a little diagram of it, just kind of for visual. But like no, orangutans famously cannot swim. They are the heaviest arboreal animals on the planet, and I mean they're big, but it's like they're dense. Not dense like stupid, but dense like it's like a big old ape made of cast iron. Like they literally sink. So you know, if you want to contain orangutans, put them on an island. Similar to that, you can do trenches. This is another thing that I see a lot in real zoos, where fences that would be pretty easy to climb. Like, and when I say pretty easy to climb, like any misguided and unsupervised child could probably climb over them. But there's a big old like trench in between there and where the animal is, and the animal's not just gonna go jump in the trench, you know. So yeah, I generally don't use these techniques just because in the game and as well as in real life, then they kind of put a lot of distance between the guests and the animals. I guess that's not that far, but he's like right on the other side of it. And so guests will complain about not being able to have a good view because they're not very close. Also, they take up a lot of space, and a lot of times the space is a constraint. Another thing that you can do is use rocks. Now that is something that I do use a lot. If you want like a natural backdrop, I use it a ton in the bears section, mainly because this big old staff area behind the bears section, not as much as I love the way it looks, then I did want to kind of keep it out of sight of the guests. So it allowed for me to kind of hide the staff area a little bit, but also give the bears some private area that look like caves that also hide the gates. The goodness, words are difficult sometimes, but I try my best. So yeah, we have ourselves a nice like big, you know, rock facade. That's, you know, it's a very nice like natural barrier. Now I will say something that is very important that I learned while constructing this zoo. I do not think that guests can see through. I don't think they can see through custom fences. I do think they can see through rock. And maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm wrong. I have no like definitive proof saying that guests can see through all of these faux rocks. But I do have evidence. This habitat in particular, like for the longest time, I would have a huge congestion of guests like right here, and I'm pretty sure it's because they were just looking right through the rock into the cave. So if you're going to use rocks as your barriers, there's a couple things you can do. You can put it over the top of like an opaque barrier, like concrete, like I've done that in the bear section, on a few different section things, which I'm not going to go show. I'm not going to go show that, but because it's kind of a pain to I'd have to move the rocks and stuff. You can do that, or again, what I did in the bear section, you can just make it so that the rocks are not accessible. I guess that side isn't accessible by guests. If guests could get back here, if they could get to this path right here, then they might look right through there. But they can't. So, but you know, rocks are a very cool thing to use as barriers. It's just, you know, it took a lot of experimentation on my part in order to properly use them, and you will likely have to do the same. I mean, this game is, you know, all about experimentation. And then lastly, you can also use plants. I have not really done this in this zoo, but there are plants, not all plants, but some plants are, you know, cannot be like passed through by animals. Grass obviously can be walked through by animals, otherwise the lions would not have a lot of space here at all. But like elephant grass, common reeds, things like that. Like those are common reeds right there. But like things that are generally very dense, like tall and thick, those are generally like, you know, animals can't pass through them. So if you wanted to make part of your barrier out of foliage, then that's something that you could definitely try. Like I said, it's not something that I have done, at least not yet, but it is an option. Now, one thing that I really want to mention, and this rang true for me yesterday. I built this habitat yesterday, like I said, for the striped hyena. And I cannot say this enough. Check the traversable area. Check the traversable area. Especially when you use custom barriers or null barriers anywhere. Check the traversable area because you don't want your animals escaping. Now this is the traversable area of the hyena. Notice there are no escape points. That's good. That's great, even. Now, let me show you the problem that I faced yesterday. Let's see if I can actually replicate it. So this was like right about here. Good. Now I'm going to hit play so that the traversable area recalculates. And hopefully I can actually like replicate this problem. I might not be able to, but like, so if we look at this guy right here, this is an adult striped hyena. Still no problem, see? And this is what I did whenever I first built this habitat. What I didn't account for is the fact that these are not all adults. This is a little guy, a little juvenile. He is smaller. If you can, check your traversable area for juveniles and adults, because this is not the first time, but the second time that I've had a problem with juveniles being able to escape. Now the problem, and I finally figured this out, is that they were jumping. They can fit on top of the Jeep, and then they can like jump on the kiln, I think, and then they can jump up on this awning, and then they can just walk up onto this wall and just walk the heck out. So, however, if I were to just move this back, hit play so that it recalculates. Okay, I didn't move it back far enough. Or maybe the problem still exists, and I just didn't, Alright, well the problem still exists, so I'm gonna have to fix it. But animals, if they can escape, they will, even if there is no logical reason for them to do so. So, cover all your bases. Now, I'm going to pause the game, and I'm going to wrap up this video before I go and try to fix this problem. But like, for example, though, if I get rid of the Jeep, then, and, you know, if I get rid of the Jeep, and then, where the heck is the baby? There he is. But see, it's like, and I hit play. Alright, well, I don't know what the heck the problem is, but that's not y'all's solution to spectate, I guess. Thank you so much for tuning in, and I do hope that you learned a thing or two about barriers. Per usual, I am delighted to see comments. You know, I'm happy to answer any questions that I can. If the question is what the heck is wrong with the hyena habitat, then I might not have an answer for you. But otherwise, I'll do my very best. So like, comment, subscribe, do all that stuff to help the algorithm, and I will see y'all next time. Bye-bye.